Maybe you are rich, maybe you're poor, maybe you've experienced being both at some point, at different points in your life. I know I have. But the divide between the rich and the poor, it's only becoming bigger. And if you haven't figured it out yet, being wealthy isn't all about money, as you're going to find out in today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. So what's the big difference between the rich and the poor? Well, that's a question that I was asked by Andy Hart when he interviewed me for his Maven Money Podcast, one of the most successful financial podcasts in the United Kingdom. It's actually a podcast I listen to the whole time. So today's show is a recording of his interview with me, Andy Hart's interview of me for the Maven Money Podcast. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of his probing questions of me as he asks me about my book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, that I wrote together with Tom Corley. Now, if you don't know about this book, it's been translated into 4 foreign languages and it's become an international bestseller. And as we discuss the differences between the rich and the poor, you'll realise that a lot of it comes down to their mindset. The difference between the rich and the poor mindset can change how you think about the world and how you interact with money. Now, I remember first learning about this in the classic book by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Now, that was written almost 100 years ago, but you're going to still find it on the bookshelf of almost every successful entrepreneur, businessman, investor. Now, there's a good reason why the book is called Think and Grow Rich and not Get a Job and Work Hard and Grow Rich. It's because the rich think differently to most people. They think differently to those who work hard at a job and don't end up rich. As we look at the way the rich and the average Australian think about money and financial success, remember that when I use the words rich and poor, I don't intend any offence. I'm not making value judgments, and I recognise that most Australians aren't really poor. I'm just using the expression that contrasts 2 very different ways of thinking. So welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast, and let's start looking at the differences between the wealth-generating thoughts of the rich and the impoverished thoughts that many Australians and people all around the world carry around.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney Podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
So, Michael Yardney, welcome to the Maven Money Podcast. How are you doing, my friend? Coming to me from a very far away place, down under.
My pleasure, Andy. And it is a real pleasure because every week I get your podcast, I listen to it. It's one of the few podcasts I listen to regularly. And we talk about similar things, behavioural finance, the psychology of success, and why people do silly things with their money. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with you about that.
And you're also passionate about trying to get people to become more financially literate, and wiser as they get older as such. Your sort of speciality is the property business, and you're a prolific author and a prolific content creator. The listeners will probably pick up. You're a little bit older than me, but we're coming at this from the sort of same angle to trying to promote good habits for people.
I wish I knew about the things about money I know today when I was your age. I had to, ruin the first half of my life chasing money for all the wrong reasons, Andy, when I understood that money was important in those areas where it's important and not at all important in the other parts of your life. My life became much easier.
And your bread and butter, let's say, is property and advising on property investment and property investment for yourself. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I bought my first property in my early 20s. It was back in the 1970s, went halves with my parents because I didn't have enough. I put 2,000 Australian dollars down, and Andy, we got $12 a week rent, and we were excited. But we took a 30-year mortgage for an $18,000 property, had no idea how we were ever going to pay off that mortgage. And then we had a new government come in, inflation crept up, the value of the property increased considerably, and it suddenly gave me equity and extra rent to buy another one. And I thought, hey, this was good. But the problem, Andy, is that if you get it right first time, sometimes you think you're smarter than you are. So it wasn't because I knew what I was doing. I just happened to be in the right spot at the right time. One of my mistakes, of course, was selling that property because I thought I needed the money to do something else. But can I share a story with you, please, Andy?
Go for it.
I sold that second half of that property back to my parents. My wife and I, Pam and I, bought it back off my mother for $250,000. Many years later, sold it for $32,000, $250,000. Since then, we've pulled it down and built 2 townhouses, modern accommodation on a small compact block. So I still own my first property, $18,000 then, probably worth about $2.5 million today.
Wow, this is it. This is it. You've seen it work and you've experienced it. Just on this, a bit of a topical question. So Australia hasn't had a recession for how long?
Since the early 1990s, but we're in it now, brought about by COVID.
You've actually tipped into a recession now via COVID?
Yes, we've had 2 quarters of negative GDP. The last quarter, the June quarter, was only reported recently because there's a bit of a lag, and there was a massive fall in GDP. But that's because we were locked down in different states. The rules were different, but we couldn't get out, we couldn't spend. And so it wasn't an economic issue, it was a health issue, and the financial system was just closed down, Andy.
Sure, but regardless of what happened, the end result was an economic issue. So however it hits us, in what flavour, I think we've just got to accept it, no?
Very much so. Unemployment is very high and businesses are on a lifeline. They're on life support. Our government in Australia has, slightly differently to you, given handouts to companies, small businesses, to keep their employees. It's something they call JobKeeper, I should say. So rather than putting people on unemployment, people are being kept in their jobs, and that's slowly being eased out. So the question is going to be, what happens when these handouts are taken away?
How's it work being a landlord, property investor in Australia? Have tenants sort of asked for rent cuts? What's happening with that?
Exactly right, Andy. So what's happened is the government has not only helped tenants, but also landlords. They've given the banks the mandate. They've actually forced them to give people who are having financial hardship a mortgage holiday. Now, what this is you actually defer the mortgage. You're still going to have to pay it. There's interest paid upon interest, but a lot of people were given 6 months and now they've extended it a bit further. So if you're having financial hardship, can't keep up your home mortgage or your investment mortgage, you can put the payments on hold for a while. Similarly for tenants, we can't evict tenants if tenants are showing hardship, and some are playing the game, Andy. Some are saying, I haven't got the job when they have. So they've got to prove that they haven't got the income, that they are seeking unemployment benefits, and a lot of tenants are getting rental relief. And property investors are small business owners. They still got their outgoings to pay. So everyone's doing it tough at the moment, Andy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Back to the sort of creating financial freedom for yourself. So why is it that most people can't get out of the rat race, even though they live in sort of wealthy, developed countries? So what have you experienced from that point of view?
Well, Andy, I think it's most people have bad money habits. They have poor money habits. They don't know how to do money. They're not what I call financially fluent. But what's happened in Australia, and I assume it's happening in England as well, is the rich are getting richer. The gap between the rich and the poor is only widening. And the financial challenges of COVID-19 has reminded us. It's reminded us how many people don't have emergency funds. They don't have adequate buffers. They're only 2 or 3 weeks away from being broke. And the problem is most of us were taught by well-meaning people, by our parents, but they were unwealthy. So we've developed bad habits. We spend more than we earn. We don't know how to build an asset base. We don't know the difference between assets and liabilities, Andy. So we don't have our money working for us. And most of the Australians, and I guess the people in most of the Western countries, they don't even understand why. They think the rich are greedy. They're lucky. They're doing something different. But they're not. They've just got different habits, Andy.
And why is it that people choose not to ever get their head around money and understand this business of money? What have you seen throughout all of your decades in the wealth creation game?
Well, we're not born knowing how to do money. So the first 9, 10 years of your life, you learn from your mentors. Your mentors are basically your parents. Things you heard, things you saw, things you experienced, things you didn't hear. So I remember my memories of my childhood, Andy, were that my parents used to fight. They used to argue at the end of the month because the budget didn't add up, and my father blamed my mother, and it wasn't her fault. So I grew up, interestingly, with some bad ideas about money. I didn't feel good about it. So some people don't understand how money works. They've seen it from their parents, and their parents have made excuses. They say, oh, you can't have money and love. You can't be religious or spiritual and have money. It's their excuses for not being able to achieve what they wanted to achieve. And so they're passed on.
Yeah, the stories they were telling themselves. Interestingly, like let's say 30, 40, 50 years ago, and there was less temptation around. People were still terrible at money back then, weren't they? I mean, now we've got so many more temptations. It's still the same story repeating itself.
That's a really interesting point, because when I first started off, there weren't credit cards. I remember when they first came out. So if you wanted to buy something for Christmas, you did lay-by. Well, that's what we called it here, where each week you'd go to the shop and you'd leave a little bit, and at Christmas time you could actually pick up your gift. I know my parents put money aside in a jar so that at the end of the year, and for many years we weren't able to go on holidays when my parents' friends were. My friends' parents were. My friends went on Christmas holidays and we didn't. But you put money aside. But even then, people were bad, despite the need to save, need to earn. And I guess it's because they were never taught this. They weren't taught at school. They weren't taught by their parents. And these habits are passed down.
Sure. What differentiates the sort of rich, as it were, from the average punter? Any sort of key things you see?
Well, I guess the first thing is they got more money, haven't they? But that's really not what I guess you're asking. I think it's how they think. I guess it's the fact that they have learned good money habits. So they've learned to spend less than they earn. They understand the concept of delayed gratification. That's something that is so hard today, isn't it, Andy?
That's the key thing.
So they've learned to become rich slowly. They're not even trying to get rich quick overnight. That's the difference. Look, sure, there's the occasional rich person who's inherited money, or they've won the lottery. But in my mind, if you don't have the right mindset and you suddenly come into money, you lose it. And you would have probably seen that as a financial advisor, that people who suddenly get a windfall, if they don't know what to do with it, they don't have it there 5-7 years later, do they?
No, it is those good habits compounded over multi-decades, basically doing the right things consistently. You've written a few books. I've had a little bit of a dabble into them, but one thing that I've picked up is your 5 levels of wealth. So do you want to expand on that for the listeners? What's the
Sure, I will. But maybe I should just say one more thing about your last question, if I could, because you asked about the rich and the poor. And I genuinely believe if you took all the money in the world and you distributed it evenly amongst everyone, it'd be back in the same proportions again in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And that's because you can't drive a Lamborghini with the engine or the mindset of a Hyundai. So for people to become rich, you asked what's the difference between the rich and the poor, you actually have to have a different mindset. You've got to have financial fluency. And I actually call that your wealth operating system. It's the thing that actually connects your inside from the outside world. I learned it from, I guess it was a book many, many years ago that has been rewritten about a decade ago by T. Harv Ekers, which said that your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to your results. So it's really the inside world that leads to your outside world. So if you want to go up the levels of wealth, which I'm going to answer your question in my long-winded way, if you want to get there, you actually have to have a different headspace, a different mindset. Otherwise, you won't climb up that ladder. I guess you've noticed that amongst your clients as well.
Yeah, exactly that. So, 5 levels of wealth.
Okay, well, I guess what happened was dealing with people over the decades, I realized that there's a hierarchy, there's a pyramid. I call it the wealth pyramid. And like a pyramid, there's lots of people at the bottom and, it peters out at the top. There's fewer people at each stages as you go up. And I believe it's important to understand where you are on this hierarchy so you know what to do to move up to the next level. But maybe I should give a disclaimer. We're talking a lot about money, and money is important in those areas of life where money is important, and it's of no benefit at all to other parts of your life. But Andy, I've realized over the years that any problem money can solve isn't really a problem. And that's the reason I guess many of us want to become richer. But the financial challenges many of us have experienced in the last year with COVID has just reminded us the importance of having good financial habits. And so where we start, at the bottom, I think a lot of people are level zero. They're not even on the financial hierarchy. They're financially unstable. And since most people live from paycheck to paycheck, I don't even know why we say that anymore. We don't get paychecks here anymore, do we? But they're unstable. If they lose their job, if they've got an emergency, if they've got an illness, if their car breaks down, they've got no reserves, Andy. They don't know how to cope. So how do they handle unexpected burdens in life? What they do, they borrow more. And they get further into debt, and this only creates more financial hardship, and the cycle goes on. So at the bottom of the pyramid, the big base where a lot of people are is financial instability. And I guess if some of our listeners are in that position, at least understand it, accept it. By the way, you're in good company and you've got to do things differently. You've got to get to the next level. The next level up, level 1, is financial stability. And this is where you've got the most basic level of wealth. You've accumulated sufficient liquid assets. Maybe you've got some savings, some money in a line of credit and a bank account. So you've got your living expenses covered for, 6 months. You've got some private medical insurance, some life insurance. So if something happened to you, you'd protect your family, your lifestyle, if you became ill, disabled. So level 1 is financial stability. You've got the comfort of knowing if you've got an unexpected challenge, your lifestyle won't be unduly compromised as long as it doesn't go on too long. Next level up is what I call level 2 financial security. And that's where you've accumulated sufficient assets to generate enough passive income to cover your most basic expenses. So it could be my preferred asset class of residential real estate. But Andy, I recognize that if anyone just says to you, real estate, property, or shares, you probably should be a little bit cautious. They may have a vested interest. I'm not suggesting you should do only one or the other. In fact, I believe you need a blend. By the way, I fully agree. I've listened to you so often about having a plan and sticking to it and not being sidetracked by all that's happening in the media. But that's a different story. But the financial securities you've used, whatever you've done to build an asset base to cover your home mortgage, to pay your tax payments, to pay your grocery bills. And at this level, you can stop working and you could maintain a simple lifestyle, a basic lifestyle. But that's not enough in my mind. I think you should go for level 3, which is financial freedom. And here you've accumulated enough assets to generate enough passive income to pay for the lifestyle you want, not just necessarily a current lifestyle, the lifestyle you want. And if you're like many people, you're still probably going to keep working like I do, but you don't have to go to work. And then the last level, right at the top of the pyramid, a small group of people, the sophisticated investors, have got financial abundance, Andy. They're financially free of the pressures. They can give back to the community. They can train their family and their kids to get to the next level. So my suggestion is understand where you are on the pyramid. Decide you want to become wealthy. Give yourself permission to do that. And the first thing is to invest in your financial education, because as we've said a couple of times, most people don't even know about this.
Sure. Have you put a monetary number on financial abundance out of interest?
Well, it depends. No, I've never been asked that, and I've never really thought that, because everyone's desires are different. I live a reasonably luxurious lifestyle. I don't show off, but we take 2 long holidays a year. We go on cruises. Hey, we used to go on cruises. We used to go overseas. I can't even go more than 5 kilometres from my home at the moment, Andy. I can go shopping once a week to the local supermarket, and that's my outing. But financial abundance means that you've actually got sufficient, not just for you, but intergenerational wealth. So when we sit down with our clients, we want them to grow, protect, but also pass on their wealth, because most people have got children and grandchildren, and congratulations. I know you're at the very early stages of having kids, but I'm now not investing just for myself or for my children. I've got 10 grandchildren in my family and one more on the way. Amanda, my daughter, told me she's pregnant again in March, so I've got more to come. And I'm paying their private school fees to actually help our kids. So this is intergenerational wealth. It's allowing me to give them the lifestyle that I wasn't able to have, Andy.
Because frequently when an individual goes on that path to become financially free and they implement all of these good habits, and they delay gratification, it's very hard for them to break these good habits. So, wealth then just becomes like a river. It just gets deeper and wider. So yes, you can do things like paying for your grandkids, school fees, etc. And then you hope to pass these good habits down through the generations and hope they don't, bugger it up, as it were. That's something I see frequently. I mean, fast money, people spend money, just excessively. And as you say, if there's a bit of a something that's out the blue, then they're going to run out of money quite quickly. But people that build money slowly over time, they're in the good habits and delay gratification. So it's very hard for them to come across something that's really going to sort of trip them up.
Well, they will make mistakes, but I think one of the things you should remember is it's not what you leave your kids, it's what you leave in your kids. So interestingly, one of my sons works for me in my business. Two of my kids are interested in real estate and property and the other aren't, and that's fine. And somebody asked him, what did you learn from your father? What did you see? And it reminded me how important it is because you are your children's mentors. And he said, we always used to on the weekend go and look at properties and do real estate and look at his property developments. And I guess the conversations around my kitchen table, my children's kitchen table when I was young, was very different, very affirmative, very positive compared to the ones that I had when I was young with my parents.
Your conversation around the breakfast table was rental yields. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, we talked about financial things. That's right. Andy, can I tell you my father's financial plan, and it just came to me now that we were talking about this, was every Saturday morning he'd sit at the kitchen table having his black coffee and a cigarette, and he would do numbers and figures on a piece of paper. And I asked him, what are you doing? And he was working out what he would do when he won the lottery. So every Saturday he took lottery tickets, and what he did was win a little bit, enough to get him to buy more lottery tickets. Never had a big win, but the lottery is not a financial plan, is it, Andy?
No. Back to a previous point you mentioned, money fixes money problems. It doesn't fix life problems, but most people are on that pursuit thinking money's going to fix all of their problems, and they get money and they think, actually, it just fixed my money problems. The real problems are my life problems. Now I'm going to reassess everything and focus on that. So who do you blame for the fact that most people don't become financially free? What's your thoughts on that? Where's the issue?
I think what happens is the poor people blame others. They say it's the government's fault. They're not looking after me. Boy, are they wanting handouts at the moment because of the financial hardships with COVID. They're blaming their boss who's not paying them enough, the education system. They're not recognising what's happening. They're blaming others. The poor think the rich have become lucky. But unless they change the way they think, they're not going to do things differently. So they've got to start to understand their money habits. And I guess when I learned that I'm the result of all the decisions I've made and the decisions I've chosen not to make a long time ago, I'm sitting here because of a decision I made 3 years ago to download a podcast. And I listened to that podcast and I heard you say on your show, hey, if you've got some ideas, give us a call and let me know. So I sent you an email. We're sitting here because of decisions you and I made a while ago, and so is everyone else. And so don't blame others. You've got to make the right decisions. And rather than blaming others, get a mentor. Go to a financial planner. Be realistic. Don't try and get rich quick. Develop good money habits. Don't blame people.
What's your thoughts on a modern economy couldn't run if everybody was financially savvy? We still need people to clean the toilets and flip the burgers. The government doesn't want everybody to become financially savvy and financially literate because the economy couldn't function. There has to be that sort of disparity. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not a zero-sum game. So if I own a fantastic share portfolio, it doesn't stop you getting it. If I own 3 investment properties or more, it doesn't stop you having it. So I don't see it that way. I would like to pull everyone up to the higher level because we're living in much, much better times than our parents did and definitely than our grandparents did. Yes, there are going to be new jobs, but there's enough jobs that you and I don't want to do. But there's going to be people coming from other countries, from underdeveloped countries, moving in to work at the supermarkets and the petrol stations and do the jobs you and I don't want to. And let's allow them to enjoy the lifestyle that we're enjoying and living in the great countries we're living in. I think there's enough for everyone.
Interesting. And what are the biggest mistakes you see sort of average people making? Have you got any sort of go-tos when it comes to that?
Well, Well, it goes back to the book that you've quoted and I've quoted before, The Richest Man in Babylon, that says spend less than you earn, save 10% or whatever, invest and reinvest. The trouble is most people spend their money and then try and save what's left over. It doesn't work that way. Now, the taxman knows it doesn't work that way. It's going to take its money from you before you get yours because it knows it won't get it at the end of the year. So first of all, the big mistake is they don't save, that they spend more than they earn. And if they suddenly earn more money, they get a better car, they buy a bigger home, they have more luxuries. That's the bracket creep, of course. And the other is they don't understand the difference between assets and liabilities. The car is nice, but it's not an asset. It's a depreciating asset. The golf clubs are nice, but they're a liability. And others have just taken on too much debt. Today, people have got this buy now, pay later mentality. They think the limit on their credit card's their money, Andy. It's not. You're buying your future money and paying interest to have the right to use it today. And I guess the last big mistake is they just don't build an asset base. They're investing for cash flow. They're living for cash flow. I believe you need an asset base. And I know in your case, you recommend the shares in the big companies of the world. I recommend residential real estate, or both, to be blunt. And so they're the big mistakes.
Just on that, I was just thinking back to when I used to spend credit cards when I was very shortly after leaving university. You're right. The $7,000 limit, that was my zero. That wasn't -7. It was like, wow, I've got so much still to go on this one. Very interesting. Do you think we are exiting the golden block of time for real estate wealth creation? I'm certainly seeing it in the UK. It's not as easy as it used to be. We've got some horrendous sort of tax guards up against it all. I mean, yeah, what's your thoughts on the next 30 years of Australian real estate compared to the previous 30? Is it going to be a walk in the park? Any idiot can buy it. It goes up, remortgage it, buy another one, snowball.
You're right. It's going to be very different moving forward. First of all, residential real estate is a game of finance with some houses thrown in the middle. So over the last years, interest rates have dropped significantly. Just go back to the global financial crisis, 10, 12 years ago. I was happy when my mortgage was 10%. I have just refinanced recently some of my mortgages, Andy, fixed for 2.4%. In interest only for the next 3 years. I've never been able to borrow money as cheaply. So first of all, it's easier to hold real estate. But the trouble is the banks are being much more cautious. They learned from their mistakes that led the world into the problems in 2008, 2009. So in a lower interest rate environment, in a lower inflationary environment, in a lower environment of lower wages growth, it's first of all going to be harder to save the deposit that you need because you're not going to get as good wages. And there's going to be a whole generation of people after the financial challenges our countries have had in the last year or so to get good wages. So it'll be hard to get a deposit. Then the banks are going to make it much harder for you to be able to borrow to get the next property and the next property. And then right at the end, once you've got an asset base, Eddie, they're making it harder to refinance. You need much lower loan to value ratios. You need to prove serviceability. So in the past, you could almost get a loan online without having to prove anything. At the moment, there's much stricter prudential lending criteria. And that's not bad because the alternative is to see what happened in America where everyone went broke because of the bad loans that were there. But to answer your question, it won't be as easy, but it never was.
It was bloody easy here at one point. You put down a 10% deposit, 15% deposit, 12% deposit, minimal tax to buy it, the rent's quite decent, et cetera, et cetera. It used to be pretty much a walk in the park for some of it. I don't know if that was the same in Oz.
Well, yes, it was, but look at the end result. It may be easy, but it wasn't simple, and that's not a play on words. It was easy to get real estate, but they didn't actually, most people weren't able to accumulate their assets because they didn't know what to do. Exactly right.
Yeah, you still had to pull the trigger and take that risk, because again, the other people around you weren't really doing it. Yeah, I believe we're exiting the golden age of real estate wealth creation for the average punter. There's just a few more moving parts now, and you just need to be a bit more sort of strategic with it. So then it just boils down to the fact of once you factor in all of the moving parts, the high hassle factor, the genuine passive investment is investing in an investment fund. It's literally invest and forget. And the amount of time maintenance that's required on it is absolutely minimal. It's a slower burn and there's no leverage. I get all that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting the next block of time because we've had such a decent run of it. it's going to be interesting then. As you said, after the great financial crisis, you were probably servicing your property portfolio at the interest rates at the time. And all that's happened is they've been hammered down by 75%. So again, from a sort of an income expense point of view, you've probably had a good run leading up to this point now.
I have. And I remember that when I first had to get a loan, it was very difficult. It's gone a full circle, so it was quite easy. And if the global financial crisis hadn't happened overseas and those institutions hadn't gone down, Australia's financial system could have gone down also, because it was so easy, it was too easy to get a loan that people who couldn't service their debts were getting it and could have got themselves into trouble. We went the other extreme, and now they actually look at your Uber Eats accounts and your Netflix accounts, and seriously, there's actually forensic investigation into your expenses to understand. It's gone a little bit too far the other way, Andy.
And what is that on? Are they calling that like an affordability thing, or what bracket does that come under?
So in Australia, the banks need to understand that you can service your debt. And at the moment, with interest rates at around 2%, they still put a limit on, as if interest rates are going to go up.
They put a nominal rate on it or whatever. So it's like,
on top of it, there's no way interest rates are going to go up in the next couple of years.
Yep, sure.
And then they actually, correctly in some degrees, then say, yes, you're getting so much rent, but we've got to discount it by 20% because you've got your outgoings and other things. So it is much harder.
They're being cautious on every factor of it. Yeah, okay. Does that ultimately end up in them offering you a lower loan-to-value loan? So
Exactly.
they're saying, based on everything we've done, we're only going to give you 50%, which years ago, it's like, we'll give you 80%, no questions asked.
Very much so. The other thing is, I've seen people who've inherited $1 million and the banks won't lend them any money because they can't prove a serviceability. So they can go off and buy a property, but if they want to gear against it, borrow against it, they're going to find it hard. So what they've got to do is buy with no debt, all of a sudden get rental income and show, hey, look, I've got income coming in, and then the bank's going to lend them money.
Just buy a cheap property, service it, just to get the tick in the box, then apply for a loan and borrow.
Yeah.
So it's just become a whole charade.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much. We had a royal commission into our banking system a couple of years ago in Australia, and that showed that there were some, let's call them interesting practices, where people were given loans they shouldn't, people were given commissions to refer. Hairdressers were actually referring to the local bank manager, and they were getting a commission for referring their clients. Things like that. Financial products were being sold that were not correct for the clients. So they've gone the other way, and they've been too cautious recently.
So was that the second question the hairdresser asked when you sat down? So you going on holiday this year? You planning on buying any property? Fancy yourself as a landlord?
It almost got that way. And that was, again, where we could have gone down the route of some of the other countries as well.
Interesting. So you have obviously achieved financial independence, and you can, wake up and do whatever you want. So what's the deal with you still working? This is you should be on a beach apparently. That's what the books tell us.
Yeah, well, people say that, Michael, now that your candles cost more than your birthday cake, why are you still working? And I know others are actually wondering, hey, is this guy really financially independent? Does he own a substantial portfolio? If so, why is he actually doing this? Why is he still working? And I guess the answer to these questions are instructive for anyone who wants to develop financial independence, particularly if you're wanting to build a real estate portfolio. So the answer to the second question is, yes, I am truly financially independent. By the way, I've had many, many years at this. I've been almost 50 years in it. So don't compare your chapter 10 to my chapter 40 or 50. But at my books and seminars, I talk about a cash machine. Maybe I could actually quickly tell you that story, because many years ago, one of my business partners in the 70s, late 70s, 80s, Brian, came to me and said, Michael, I want a cash machine. And I said, what? He said, I want a cash machine. I want to flick the switch in the morning and all the money comes out, and I turn it off at night, and I can go home and play with my 4 kids, and I come back the next morning, I'll flick the switch and all the money comes out. And I said to him, yeah, Brian, I want a cash machine too. Well, I now have a cash machine. I've got an asset base of residential real estate, commercial real estate, funds like you say, because I genuinely believe you do have to have some managed funds and shares, and I'm not too good with that, so I give it to a financial planner to look after. So it's given us the choices in life. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned over the years is why I'm working. So maybe I could give it with a little story. Ringo Starr, I read about Ringo Starr, the Beatle. He was touring America a couple of years ago. He was 74 at the time, and he was doing a multi-city tour of America at the age of 74, turning up to one city, performing, leaving, going on to the next place. And I know Mick Jagger's doing this at the moment.
You mean some sweaty rundown bar? Is that what this is leading to?
No, I think
Okay,
Mick Jagger's doing it the same. And I guess, first of all, it reassured me. It suggests that maybe in 10 years' time, I might somehow or other be able to still get on stage and do my seminars. But over the years, I've worked hard so that I don't have to now work for financial reasons. I'm doing it because I'm enjoying it. And I think it's probably the same with Ringo Starr. I think it's probably the same with Mick Jagger. I don't think they've got unmet financial needs, Andy.
No,
I think they're touring because they got nothing better to do.
Well, look at Paul McCartney. You know, he's a billionaire.
Yeah.
And he's still getting into a pub on a Sunday night and doing a show.
Yeah, sure. So if I wasn't working and getting paid by my clients, I'd be sitting in a coffee shop in a restaurant talking about real estate and having a coffee and not getting paid. So I may as well sit across a lounge. Or nowadays, I'm doing it on Zoom, speaking with clients. Not that I see many clients anymore, only a few high net worth ones, and talking about real estate and getting paid for it. So I've got nothing better to do, but I still take my holidays. I still have a balanced life, Andy.
I've heard recently, so very rich individuals just are almost bored with life, and they become Uber drivers and just to meet people and just talk, rubbish all day. Very, very funny. Just on the property side, what is the admin like with having the portfolio that you look after? I mean, I know you can get people to help you out and they can deal with the day-to-day, but you're still the overall chief puppet master. So once you've got this cash machine of residential property, commercial property, is it genuinely, if you can strategically set things up to be as passive as it can be? Let's say X hundred thousands of pounds are coming in. You can just pay one person and say, look, your job is to never contact me ever. However that's going to work.
Okay. It's a little bit different from your form of investing where you buy the managed funds and you leave.
No. I completely understand that. I understand there's a high hassle factor with the residential and commercial property, but I'm just saying, you get somebody who knows what they're doing. You say, look, I'm paying you so you don't contact me unless it's something really important. And we got to work out how to repurpose this building, or, like tenant negotiation or whatever. Yeah.
So I'm spoiled. I have my own property management company.
Yes.
We look after $2 billion worth of assets for clients. Therefore, I already, but
so you're a client of your own company.
Yes, I am. I am.
Great.
It sounds almost vain. I don't want to say it, but I don't look at my properties. I don't visit them. Even if I'm driving down the street, I don't go down the side street to look at it anymore. I used to. There was an ego factor involved. But we look after the assets of some very high net worth individuals, some from other states, some from overseas, some expats, and they trust us. So the property managers handle the hassles, pay the rent. Once a month, our clients get a statement. They get the bills paid. And some of them say, I want to be told if there's an expense over, let's say $500. Others say over $1,000. And others say, no, I actually want to go and do it myself. By the way, they shouldn't do that. So property investment should be treated like a business. Your assets, your properties, your staff, you've got to look after them. They've got to behave and do the right thing. Otherwise, you get rid of them. You have to pay a redundancy package and get rid of them and get a better staff member. But no, you shouldn't be actively involved, Andy.
Yeah, sure. So you've got it to a point where you're a client of your own firm, but you're a substantial, point of, more than a handful, so it makes sense to employ a decent company to look after it. So genuinely, there is a few months where you have absolutely no direct involvement in some annoying administrative things around the properties.
Because of the size of my portfolio, there's always tenants moving in and tenants moving out. And my instructions to my property managers are, don't tell me unless it's an exception. If you're worried,
great,
tell me. But otherwise, treat it like it would be your own. If I give them that leeway, I have to back them up. I can't, if they do that, then say, hey, why did you do that? Why didn't you tell me? That's not fair because I've given them the authority to do it.
But I'm sure some of your clients like to micromanage and some of yours don't. And they're like, literally, I want to be hands off as possible.
Exactly right. And many of the busy professionals don't want to be involved. But once a year, just like you do with your financial planning clients, we sit down with them and we assess, how's your portfolio going? Is it performing like you'd expect it to? Is it something we can improve? Is it time to look at your mortgages? Should you upgrade your insurances? So you have to take some time, but it shouldn't take a lot of time, Andy.
Sure, great. And then you'll have quiet years and, busy years, swings and roundabouts.
Sure.
So there's a shed load of books out there and you've added to the shed load of books. So yeah, what's the difference about your books? What's been the writing process and what sort of key books do you think are sort of the best ones you've written? Where are you with all that? You've written 9 books, is that right?
I have. The last one just a couple of weeks ago came out, Negotiate, Influence, Persuade. For a long time, my publisher has asked me to write one on negotiation. And as I started writing that, because he said, look, Michael, you're a good negotiator. You've been involved in billions of dollars worth of transactions over the years. In fact, one of my staff members once said to me, if Michael was in a pet shop and I went in to buy a cat, he'd be about the only person who could talk me into walking out with a dog. But I've learned that's because you've got to understand how to influence and persuade. The old days of heavy negotiation is very difficult. So that's my latest book. But the one we're talking about, this Rich Habits bit, that's the one I'm most proud of. I've written it with a good friend from the United States, Tom Corley. It's been translated to Chinese, Vietnamese, Polish, of all things, Indian, 5 languages overseas. So I've got them in various languages here on my bookshelf, but it's because there's lots of people out there who want to become financially independent. So what's different about them? It's a combination of practicality and psychology. Over the years, I've learned that it is really the mindset, the psychology, just like you say over and over again in your shows, in your humans under management sessions, that really we actually have to deal with the people and teach them how to look after themselves and money. So that's the big difference. I actually have a combination of practical things that I've done. I'm not a theorist. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning. You can't drive around in a Lamborghini with the engine of a Hyundai in it. So you've got to upgrade your wealth operating system. And that's what my books are about.
Have you earned decent money from writing the books?
No. My first book in 2006 did very well. Today, people don't buy as many books. I sell a lot more on Kindle. I sell a lot more online than we do in the bookshops. My publisher is happy and backs me. And there have been some good bestsellers. But by the time the publisher takes some and the bookshops take a lot, you get a couple of dollars per book. I don't do it for that. I'm not a musician. I can't paint. That's my creative process. So I write blogs. I do podcasts. I actually get enjoyment, Andy, from the creative process. And it definitely has been a way of building my authority. I was really proud that 3-4 weeks ago, I was voted one of Australia's top 50 influencers. Didn't even know somebody was doing this survey and wrote an e-book on that. So it's helped create the authority that has helped my business, because at the moment, people aren't sure who to turn to. They don't know who to trust. So anyone can get on the internet and do a good website and have a big Instagram account. So that was really the initial reason behind it, to show my authority. Now I'm doing it for fun.
And especially the space that you're in, the wealth creation and property space, there are some unscrupulous characters in that space, shall we say. I'm sure it's the same in Australia as it is in the UK. I suppose final question, any big mistakes that you've made that you can think of, that you think are sort of things that crop up frequently?
Just to finish the point you made a moment ago about in Australia, property investment is not regulated like financial advice is. So anybody can give advice.
You can literally set up a company tomorrow, start selling seminars, just, nobody's going to hold you accountable. Yep.
Exactly right. And it seems to be too hard for our regulators to control that, because how do you differentiate from somebody helping you buy or sell a home? So anybody can do it and you don't need a license. Having said that, we have a number of financial planning licenses. And I guess once you build a particularly high profile, you've actually got to do the right thing. But that's what separated us from the others. So what have I done wrong? I guess initially I chased money. I came from a poor background. We were migrants. I came to Australia at the age of 3, and my parents both worked. They had a job, and my friends' parents were rich. They actually went into business. my parents' friends were therefore rich. So I saw things from my parents' side, and I also saw it from my friends' parents' side, and I wanted to get rich quickly. And I chased money. I didn't probably enjoy the first half of my life like I should. In fact, my enthusiasms ruined my first marriage because I was angry, I was cross, I was trying to prove myself to people, and more money doesn't help you prove yourself to anybody. Having more doesn't make you feel better. So if you're chasing it because you want more security, you just feel more insecure once you've got it. If you chase it to show that you're better than other people, it doesn't help either. So I had to work through my challenges, and I went to some great personal development seminars to learn. Tony Robbins years ago. There was a number of other people that were very big on the speaking circuit here as well. Well, he was more on the sales side. Jim Rohn was one of my mentors. Yep. I actually had a private day with Brian Tracy. I learned about the benefit of
10 grand?
No. Social. He actually, because of my database, he actually asked me to see if he was actually into multi-level marketing at that time. And we took him around for a day and showed him a few things. And I'm actually pleased I didn't go ahead with it.
Some of these characters are brilliant. You can learn so much from these guys. Wow, they're polished. Back in the day when suits on stage was all the rage.
That's exactly right.
Now it's trainers and T-shirts.
And vests. I see that you wear your vest.
People like Gary Vee is like the equivalent of what these guys used to be years ago. They're like the modern day mentors. Very interesting.
So I had to change my headspace. I had to change my mindset. I had to learn from these people. And unfortunately, I ruined my life and my first marriage in the process of doing that. And my second wife, Pam, came on this journey with me, and together we learned it, and we made some mistakes. And I had to prove myself then to her and to my kids, to resurrect myself. And that was in the 90s.
Just on that then, Michael, let's just go down the route of how to, involve your family in this. So your second wife, you said, came on this journey with you. Where's the line between, you've got to read these books, you've got to be exposed to this sort of stuff, you've got to understand how financial assets work, versus I'll just deal with all that crap, we'll just have a good time loving each other? Where's the fine line with that? Because I'm struggling with that with my wife.
Isn't that a problem that a lot of people have? Because I do run a mentorship program, and I got an email only 2 days ago from Sam from South Australia, one of the different states here, and he said, I'm watching your videos, I'm learning, I'm reading your books, but my wife won't. He said, she and her brother say, I don't want to be the richest person in the cemetery. That's the words he used. They actually poo-pah people wanting to get wealthy. And he said, I've seen that's how she's been brought up. And it's very difficult. So fortunately, Pam isn't as passionate about this as me, but was still keen to go on the journey. So I believe this happens in most relationships, though. I have read that, in fact, one way to become wealthy is, well, first of all, make money, then don't lose it. And it's actually said that you should actually be careful who you marry, because you should have somebody with similar financial thoughts to support you. But can I tell you, a divorce is a very difficult, well, I actually call it an asset reallocation program. So it's not worth going down that route. But I guess there's always that some people are more interested in sport than their partners, some more in money. So sometimes you just have to say, that's my area of life and this is yours. Now with the kids, she's going to be so busy doing that as long as she trusts you and leaves you to do those things, I've got no great wisdom advice to give you.
It's interesting, though. I think most couples struggle with it. Certainly if one of the couple then goes on this quest to become financially literate. I mean, I even have, new client meetings with one of the spouses who's listened to my podcast, gone through everything and sort of changed their mind of how they look at money. And then their partner hasn't. And then she said, I've got to come to a meeting with Andy. And then he or she sits there that isn't a podcast listener, doesn't have a clue about money. And they just start saying the most ridiculous things. And the person who knows about money has sort of got their head around it and is somewhat financial literate. They're just sort of like squirming with, oh my God, why is he or she saying these most crazy things? It's interesting. And also on the children front. So how have you introduced your kids to this sort of stuff? I mean, you loosely mentioned that you were sort of appraising properties with your 8-year-old on a Sunday morning.
Well, I think one thing was we started to speak about it at home because I learned in time the importance of that. They also saw that we enjoyed it. They also saw that we gave to charity. We gave away. I think that's one of the big responsibilities. True wealth isn't how much money you've got. It's what you've got when they take it all away. So to me, to be truly wealthy, you need money plus. You need money plus health. I mean, we know that with all the challenges happening at the moment. So I've taught them it's not just money. You need money plus time to appreciate it. You need money plus somebody to love you and for you to love, if you to be truly wealthy. So as we said earlier, money is important in those areas where it's important and not in others. And I think gratitude is critical. If you're not grateful, you're not going to appreciate it. We see these rich people who are grumpy. They're miserable. So I try to talk about those sort of things to teach my kids, yes, we live in a nice home, and yes, you do go to a good school, but we're grateful. We were not religious people, but maybe spiritual to a degree, to say it's important to help others. It's not just to accumulate. It's not the one with the most toys at the end wins.
Sure. Okay, there's some more general questions. What's your favourite book? It doesn't have to be money related. Can you think of any favourite books?
And not one of mine.
Definitely not one of yours. These bloody salesmen. Come on.
No.
Give me a book.
Interestingly, I'm just starting to read the book that you talked about in one of your last podcasts by Morgan Housel, his latest one about the psychology of wealth. And I'm reading it on my Kindle. We actually, while this is an audio podcast, you can see a part of my bookshelf behind. I've got biographies from a lot of people. So I like learning about what other people have done and learning about what they've done right and what they've done wrong and getting ideas from them. What I'm reading now is actually very different from the sort of things I had to learn before, but I'm still very interested in the psychology of money and financial independence. And Morgan Housel is one of my favorite, he's not one of, he's probably my favorite author from, he used to be with Motley Fool and now he's in Collaborative Fund.
Yeah. You mentioned about biographies. Can you think of anyone or any sort of people that you sort of look up to or interested in their story?
Many years ago, I learned a lot from Robert Kiyosaki, and I was lucky enough to interview him for my podcast about 3 or 4 months ago. It was interesting because some of the things he said are still very, very relevant today, but some of them in my mind are wrong. Things like your home is not an asset. And he's actually very negative about the way the world is going at the moment.
He is very much, isn't he? Yeah, he's going on about Bitcoin and silver and crazy stuff.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Okay, a little bit crazy. So I think we have to respect that he's helped a lot of people become
massively
financially independent, and it was very relevant then. And he said the book was written then 25 years ago for today. He knew this was coming. No, he didn't.
Yeah,
this is the crash. This is the crash that he said was going to happen 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. The same as Harry Dent, who I was lucky enough to interview as well. And I did it for fun. I think people who are optimistic are going to do much better in this world than people who are negative.
Yeah, it's interesting how he's taken that slant. But yeah, that book has certainly changed a lot of people's lives. It's been the catalyst for a lot of people to go on this journey. And even if they don't follow it, strictly, he's still been a huge influence. It's normally the number one book that it gives people permission, to take action, which is, we underestimate, the action takers to the non-action takers. Basically, I've got 3 final quick-fire questions. It's
sure,
one or the other. So is it about working hard or smart?
Smart. Working hard will only get you so far because there's only so many hours you can do. You'll never become rich unless your money's working for you while you're asleep.
I like it. Is it about lucky or good?
No, luck is not that important. In fact, it's been said, of course, that luck is being at the right place at the right time and with all the right preparation. But in fact, luck is out of your control. I believe I should be the pilot of my life, not the passenger. And once I learn that and I'm in control, and therefore any decision I make, I've got to accept, and things that are happening to me today are because of what I've done, and things we're doing today are going to create my future. So no, luck has nothing to do with it.
I like that quote. What was that? You want to be the pilot, not the passenger of your own life?
I want to be the pilot of my life, not a passenger, because most people are the passenger at the moment. What they're saying is, when the government gives me the handout, I'll be able to get back. When the government
relying
on others. No, I believe that for every cause there's an effect. Things I'm doing now create my future. And even if I'm not right, the fact that I believe I'm creating my future, Andy, helps me behave better, helps me work more efficiently. So I'm in charge. I'm in control.
And you said a quote earlier on. I didn't quite understand it, so maybe you can unpack it. You said about your candles being more expensive than the birthday cake? What do you mean by this?
Well, now that I'm 68, if I put all that many candles on.
I get it. Just the weight of the wax.
That's right.
I've never heard that. That's good. I like that. Final question, rich or wealthy?
Well, I said a moment ago that wealth has a lot more than rich or money. So wealth is all those things we talked about, money plus time and family and somebody to love and spirituality and the ability to grow and the ability to give back. So you've got to be wealthy. Rich doesn't get you anywhere.
I like it. Thank you very much for your time, my friend. Where can people find out a little bit more about you? Where's your sort of main place to go? You've probably got about 16 websites, 25 social media accounts.
Well, I guess social media, just look for Michael Yardney. Basically, my things are in Australia, but I've got a property update blog. But the Michael Yardney podcast is very popular, even in the UK. So your listeners may be interested because we talk about slightly different things, but with the same bent about not getting taken in by the short term. I love what you said so often about don't make 30-year decisions on the last 30 minutes of news. So we give similar philosophy. So the Michael Yardney podcast is a great place to start.
Thank you very much for your time, my friend, and we'll speak to you soon.
My pleasure, Andy. Well, there was a slightly different show today where I was on the other end of the microphone and Andy Hart interviewed me. But if you got some benefit from it, why not pass the message on to somebody else who you think would also benefit from learning about the rich habits and the poor habits of people to make sure that they start to become more financially successful as well? Tell somebody about the show or tell the world by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this show. And if you do, and I read out your review, as I'm about to for Anthony Quinn, I'll be happy to gift you one of my books as a way of saying thank you. So Anthony left a message, Anthony Quinn 89, saying, Michael, thank you for your continued dedication to your podcast. In a time of uncertainty and negativity, it's uplifting to listen to your positive and optimistic mindset. I really enjoyed your episode with Mark Creedon. The tall poppy syndrome is something I've definitely let affect me. So, Anthony, thank you so much for your kind words and your 5-star review. Contact me, michael@metropole.com.au, and I'd love to gift you one of my books, just as my way of saying thank you. Now, I'll be back twice a week with the Michael Yardney podcast, but in between, you can catch up with me on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?